As usual, another great guest, but a quick diversion. You'll notice that our full name is the Marketplace for Health, Wealth, and Freedom. Well, let's talk about your health for a moment. If you'd like to escape from the stranglehold of insurance and be able to see alternative doctors or go across state lines for care, then you definitely need to take a look at patientempowerment.mpb.health and see if that's the fix you've been looking for. Now, let's get back to the show.
Welcome to Freedom Hub's weekly webinar. I'm Charlie Froman, and I'm joined with my co-host, Jim Graypeck. Today's topic is the future and how dangerous it is. I think the title got the attention of some folks. Anytime someone sees the acronym DARPA, their eyes open and they go, what's going on here? Because I think by now most of us know that's the secret military apparatus that looks at all the crazy inventions, whether formed internally or externally. And at least more than a decade ago, Jim, and I'll let you intro our guest. Our mutual friend Michael Osterlink cajoled me to attend the Arlington Institute event, a book presentation by Daniel Pinchbeck, who's a real interesting character, a little on the left side, but provocative and always interesting. He had a book back then called The Return of Quetzalcoatl, who is the Aztec god. And I was into Sitchin back then, the ancient astronaut theory, all his books, and he has a book on the Central America, ancient gods and how they relate to the gods everywhere else in the world. So that piqued my interest. I went to Arlington Institute and heard that talk. The book really wasn't too much about the actual god Quetzalcoatl. It was sort of a bait and switch kind of title. I don't really remember what the book was about, but I love the title and the topic, and that's the kind of provocative content that Mr. Petersen has hosted for years at the Arlington Institute. So, Jim, why is he here?
He's here, yes, because of that, because he's a visionary thinker, and he's connected with, a lot of people from the military as a former Navy pilot. And then, I don't know, I think if I recall properly, he grew up as a good Catholic kid and somehow kind of took that dive into maybe Catholicism isn't really the way, and his mind got opened up. John, you can talk more on that if you want, but essentially looking at more spiritual things as a futurist on what's going on from technology to the ancient myths, and bringing all kinds of people together from different walks of life, from CIA spies to doctors to you name it, through the Institute, including, I know his dream work there, and through the transition talks, which he hosts. He runs now out at the Coolfont Resort in West Virginia. You can go out there once a month. It's a great speaker. And now, thanks to Zoom, he's online with that. Though Zoom isn't working so well today for him, you need to, there was a lightning strike out there, and so their internet went down. So John is calling in today to talk with us. So I'm sorry if we don't have a PowerPoint or he can't show things or we don't see him, but at least we'll get a little bit of the lay of the land of what's going on with what's possibly coming up in the future. So, it is not just all bad stuff. I think John's going to share some very positive things from his work with Gregg Bradon and Penny Kelly and all these other interesting people, maybe a greater reset instead of the great reset. So with that, John, let me turn this over to you and take it away.
And let me say, Jim, also that Mr. Petersen, if you want Jim or me to share our screen to show your website, if you, in your talk about 20 minutes or so about what's going on in your life, we certainly can show a website that you run if you want us to kind of show it to our audience.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. Appreciate it very much. And thanks for the opportunity to chat a little bit. And I'm sorry about the act of God and all that stuff, but we're making do as best we can here. What I thought I'd do is try to give a broad overview here about how the world looks from this perspective, and they'll certainly, I presume, be the basis for some further discussion. I guess the big picture here is that the solar system is moving into a new area of space. Our solar system goes around the center of the galaxy every, 20 million years or whatever it is. And it moves into, it's like flying. I'm a pilot, as Jim said, and as you fly through the clouds, they change in the density and, and the light changes and so on. It's kind of like flying into a cloud. And the context and the environment is different. It's different chemically. It's different magnetically. It's a lot more hydrogen, apparently. The Voyager satellites that we sent out, the probes that went outside of the solar system back in the early 70s, surprised everyone by suggesting that it's really different out there than it is in here, and that we are moving into a new area. And this area and the different kind of character, the electrical character of it, it makes a lot of difference. The universe we live in is an all electric world, and all you need to do is think about a little bit about how electrons operate as we understand it, and think about how in the world could electrons be running around atoms and so on, and it's all electrical forces, magnetic forces, and so on. And so that's the situation writ large. And as you move into a new space like that, what it does is it affects everything in a different kind of way. And in this particular case, it affects the stars, and they accrete more energy, and they put off more energy, and they put off different kinds of energy. And there's a variety of David Wilcock, one that's done a good bit of research on this, and suggests that the stars out in front of us that are moving into this new area have, in the last couple of years, there have been something like 25 different solar flares that have been come off of these stars because they are into this new area that has a different electrical kind of environment. And so we're moving into that. What it's doing is it's changing our sun. And the sun is doing things differently than it's done for centuries. And by the way, there's also concurrent with the waves of energy that are coming out of the center of the galaxy, which also affect the sun, and they affect life on this planet. And so one of the things that these big changes are doing is that they affect our climate. The climate change is not because of CO2 or human activity or any of things like that. This is far, far bigger, orders of magnitude larger in terms of the kind of the nature of the change that's going on. And it's coming because you're getting different output, different kind of cosmic energy that's coming off of the sun. And there's a lot of history that shows that it varies directly with what happens on the sun. And so what's going to happen is it's going to get cold. It's not going to be global warming. It's going to be a mini ice age, and it's going to start here very soon. Already the growing seasons across the northern hemisphere have been shortening every year for the last and so there's a whole speech that could be given on each one of these terms, but let me just run through it quickly so that you can get a sense of it. So you're going to get climate change, and it's going to get cold. What you're also going to get is earth changes, because the energy that comes off of the sun, and this happens, by the way, in a cyclical manner. You can go back in history, and you can figure out that there have been similar kind of events like this in the past. But it's also going to do earth changes, and so it affects the earthquakes and volcanoes and tsunamis and such things. Essentially, the center of the earth is not a molten iron, as they have suggested, but it is plasma, a core of plasma. And as these particles come off of the sun and go in there, they get converted into matter, and the matter then accumulates in the middle and pushes out, and so the planet is expanding, which is why if you've paid any attention, you've seen over the years, the last few years, all these big cracks that open up different places and holes, and houses fall in and other kinds of things, and it's happening around the planet. It's expanding, and it's doing that. What that also does, of course, is open up subterranean kind of connections between volcanoes and the magma and other such things, and so you get volcano behavior and so on, and earthquakes, and so you're going to have that kind of stuff happen. What also happens is happening is that we're in the middle of a magnetic pole shift. This is not a physical planetary pole shift. This is a magnetic pole shift, and this has happened many times in the past that the science has been able to figure out, and it's going from one from the north being on the northern end of the planet and the south being on the southern end of the planet, and it's starting to move, and it's accelerating. The poles are, and most importantly, the magnetosphere is thinning and getting thinner. The magnetosphere is important because, as you all know, I'm sure, that it is the protective layer that diverts all of this energy that's coming off of the sun, all of the extraordinarily negative. I mean, we'd all die if it weren't for the magnetosphere, which diverts all of this energy from the sun and drives it around the planet. Well, when the magnetosphere thins down, then more of that energy from the sun then hits the planet, and it affects, as I said, the planet, a variety of kind of aspects of how the planet operates. It also affects human beings. What you know from historical kind of studies and so on is that there is the human behavior, kind of writ large, varies directly with the kind of energy that's coming out of the sun. You can plot it. It's a one-to-one kind of relationship over time, and it's predictable that you'll get wars and you'll get instability and other such things at certain times, and you get stability and kind of peace and such otherwise. And so as we go through this period, it's an extraordinary kind of convergence of a variety of big cosmic things, as well as we'll talk about here in a minute, a lot of kind of terrestrial human-oriented kind of behavior. But this is a change unlike anything that frankly you've seen in recorded history, or it certainly hasn't been recorded as such. And so we're into what I believe is the most extraordinary kind of transition in the history of the world as we know it. What that means, by the way, is that I think it's an evolutionary push. It's this extraordinary kind of unprecedented a kind of push into some new space that will generate a new human and a new world out of that. And so this is epic. This is a huge kind of thing. This is not the Republicans and the Democrats and Ukraine and all that, although it is all those kinds of things. This is all part of something that is far, far bigger and than all of that. And so, you know, what you're getting is kind of an anomalous human behavior that we all are experiencing all around us right now. All of the basic systems that have supported us and that are familiar, the systems that have, and the relationships that have given us a sense of purpose and explained to us what is real and so on, how things work, they're all up for grabs, and they're all going to collapse. They're all imploding, essentially. It's that level of a kind of major kind of shift and change that's going on. And in the middle of that, and you got to keep in mind, and we'll mention it in passing, but you'd be mistaken if you thought that this was all just about things that are happening on the Earth. by the way, because there are clearly is extraterrestrial life that is engaged in one way or another with us, with this planet, and have been for a long, long time. And that also is becoming apparent now. And so what you're going to get is not only the amazing kind of geopolitical and, you know, the national kind of behavior that is really aberrant and change. I mean, you could sit around and say, how in the world all my life marijuana was illegal, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, somebody decided that it's okay, and so now it's getting legalized all over the place. Where in the world did gay marriage come from? Just out of the blue. I mean, if you look back and look at these things in terms of history from an arm's length point of view, it's just kind of bang, in 5 years' time, something. All of this business about transsexuals and stuff. I mean, it's just boom, right in your face. It just never happened. It wasn't there 5 years ago. And so you wonder what's going on here. Well, I think there is a very large kind of bipolar struggle that is going on between two factions. One faction you might call the traditionalists, or in some cases they call them constitutionalists, or whatever they are, who are trying to kind of maintain the essence of what has defined us in the past. And on the other hand, you have other factions that are clearly trying to produce fundamental kind of change in who humans are and how they operate here. In the big, again, if you back away from this, which is what you got to do if you're any kind of a futurist, if you back away from this and look at it, what you see is that, and you see it in the context of this evolutionary push, this emergence of a new human, what you have is two tracks. And one track is a technocratic technocracy track, where with Google and Facebook and GPS and all of this stuff, what they are increasingly doing is putting technology into place that increasingly constrains and controls human beings. You've got guys like Ray Kurzweil and even Elon Musk who are talking about that by 2030 or so, that your brain is going to be connected to the cloud. If you think about that for about 20 seconds, you should say, well, what are they doing to me from the cloud, and what are they sucking up from my brain, and what, and so on. And suddenly it becomes a very extraordinarily powerful controlling mechanism that essentially dominates humans and makes them subservient to whatever the leaders want. It's the Matrix, essentially. There are a lot of movie themes and books and science fiction and so on that are clearly prescient in terms of what this is about. So on one track, you've got this technocracy, and it just they just keep adding to it all the time. The COVID shots are a clear component of all of that. And they've been conditioning this space and getting ready for this for a long, long time. They've been putting fluoride in the water. They've got chemicals in the chemtrails in the air. They've got chemicals in the food because of the fertilizers and the herbicides and pesticides that they put in it. And all of it is essentially generating a whole bunch of people who essentially drink beer and watch TV and get excited about sports, and that's about it. And they have not learned how to think. We've destroyed the ability of a great percentage of the population to be able to be critically assess what in the world is going on. And it appears from my point of view is that that's all contrived and planned and has been going on for a long time. Been going on for a long time because there is this is the end of the ninth. This is the last quarter. This is the whatever. There is there's an urgency associated, again, when you pack up and you watch how they've controlled the media and everything, and the kind of language that gets used, and the false flags and the other kind of stuff. That's all. There is clearly a growing. This is growing. This is a kind of an exponential thing, and the reason why it's growing apparently is because there is an urgency, because they see that there is some kind of an event that is on our not very distant horizon. Some folks say 2027, some say 2030. Maybe it's one of these solar flares. Maybe it's something else. Don't know what it is. Maybe it's something about alien life, because certainly that's going to become clear, far clearer in the near future about who's out there and what they've been doing and what we've been doing with them and so on. All in all, it's just extraordinary, amazing kind of upheaval from that point of view, with this one track trying very hard to kind of gain more control. So if you had a bumper sticker kind of characteristic of that direction, it would be control. There's an alternative, which is this emergence of a new human that essentially is about independence. And it's about accessing that a human kind of evolves to new levels where they access some of the extraordinary kind of capabilities that have been latent inside of the human for this long. There are scientists now that start to suggest that some of this energy from the sun and the center of the galaxy is literally turning on what have been strings of DNA in us that have been suppressed in the past, and what this is doing is enabling capabilities, extraordinary capabilities that we've always had but just haven't been able to access. Things like being able to have telepathy and able to communicate by mind between people, the ability to manifest things by in an organized way, putting the images in your mind and having it turn into reality. Certainly the ability to ultimately not to eat in the way that we do now. There are plenty of people around the world right now who don't eat at all. I mean, I've known some of them, haven't eaten for 6 months, and they're in very good shape. They've learned how to convert the ambient energy that exists all around us into life force within themselves. There are indications that say that this new human, when this stuff all turns on, is going to be able to see auras in general. I mean, there are certainly people around that can do all of these things. And so it's like capabilities have been popping up throughout the society, throughout humanity, the species in different kind of places. But what's likely is that it's all going to come together and kind of and accelerate. So being able to see auras, you could be able to tell if somebody's telling the truth. You could know about their history. You could all do all kinds of things like that. The part of it would also be the enabling in far more powerful ways intuition to allow, regardless of the situation, to allow one to access and be able to know for sure what the right decision, in which direction, what you should do, what's the answer to the question, and so on. And this is all part of being the new human. And so this is about enabling and independence. And, again, if you wanted to think about it in simplistic ways, it's almost as though every capability that the technocrats are trying to produce and who are selling over on the one side of the equation is available to us all in our own selves and our own consciousness and our own. And all we have to do is kind of rise to the occasion and learn how to become that new human. And so that's what's happening on that side. And so it's an extraordinary, amazing kind of time. Near term, what you're going to think about it kind of naturally is there's going to be a winnowing out, and those on each side of this kind of option are going to self-identify themselves. I think that COVID, for instance, is a mechanism for about forcing people to make a decision. Which side of this equation do you want to do? You're going to make your own decisions, or are you going to do what they tell you to do? And there are likely to be increasing numbers. There's going to be shortages of food coming in and supply chain things. And all of these are opportunities for the powers that be to offer an alternative that would eliminate the short-term kind of problems. I mean, we'll give you food, but you've got to take this shot, or some kind of trade-offs like that force people into making really tough decisions if they are unable to kind of make the bigger decision, which to say is, I'm not going to play that game. I want to get in a new way. I want to go in a new direction. I want to become this new human. I want to become the basis for a new world. The new world emerges, by the way, because the new humans are there, and the new humans are fundamentally different in the way that they think and the way they see, obviously, and so they make different decisions. They build different institutions. They have different economies. Their governments are different. Everything else is different because they have capabilities and they see the world in a whole new way. And so, what we have on this side, of this new human side, is essentially the early kind of founders of a whole new world. Now, this whole world in this new future is talked about quite liberally in the past in ancient texts and religious documents and so on. And the Bible and other places talk about 1,000 years of peace, and other sources talk about the possibility it's as much as 15,000 years of peace. In any case, what you have here is distinct possibility. If you think of this as kind of a human birth experience where a baby is born and then goes from this one environment that's dark and contained and fairly comfortable, and it's forced through this extraordinarily painful and disruptive transition into another whole new world that's out there that would have been impossible for the baby, and in terms that we understand, at least, if I've been able to see or imagine. Well, that seems to be a good metaphor or a method or an image of what's happening here, and that for those of us who are committed to this new world and this new human, we have literally the chance to help build that new world, and that, in fact, is what we here at the Arlington Institute do. Is we're working explicitly on a number of projects to build a new vision for a new world. And as Jim has suggested, we've got this transition talks, which is a monthly speaker series where we bring speakers in, all who talk about one aspect or another of this. We're located just outside of Washington, D.C., so we get a lot of people from outside of the eastern seaboard, and then we live stream these things. But in any case, that's the big kind of picture, and there's you might imagine, extraordinary amount of details that haven't been mentioned here. but we're all participating in very fundamental ways in the most extraordinary change in history. And what we need to do is get up bigger, and we need to see the world in larger terms and not get caught up in the day-to-day kind of stuff, because that's what they're trying to do. They've captured the media, and they're trying to engage your emotions, because your emotions is what enable and produce the kind of future that you experience. And so if you are convinced that it's going to be horrible, then that's what you're going to get. And so you have to extract yourself from that and start to become independent and operate on your own. And that's what this is all about, becoming a new human in a new world.
Great. That was a great presentation. Thank you, John. And let's open this up to questions. I see Charlie, your hand is up.
Trying to demonstrate good behavior, Jim. So folks, yeah, click the raise hand icon. I showed from John's website some of the futuristic themes, some good, some not so good. So in general, I got the theme that some of your old friends at DARPA trying to create a better world have good intentions, but there are some severe risks if these great tools are misused by the people kind of stuck in that avaricious mindset, that lusto dominando, lust for power and wealth and control. And of course, we're seeing that around the pandemic with the great reset elitists trying to exploit fear to, shove us into their data monetization control grid, and using their coming digital currency and the vaccine passports and the carbon footprint to coerce good behavior, which would put those pursuing the independence behavior that you want at risk. So how are you finding that middle path between the convenience we want from the techies, and the freedom we need through independence to build that greater reset?
Well, that's interesting. First of all, I'm not from DARPA, never have been and never worked for DARPA. I've known some people at DARPA, and back when I was involved back in the 90s, and they were just a very interesting operation that was not afraid to look at anything. And so you got very creative people doing very interesting stuff. I think not only DARPA, but DOD and the White House and everything else has all morphed into something quite different than what it used to be, the military, certainly. And I'm not in the middle of any of that anymore. I've been out of that and for all of this century, as a matter of fact. So, but you raise a very important and interesting kind of point, and that is, how do you get from here to there in the short term? Because in the terms that I've just described, technocracy is the domination of broad-based technology, and we all, I'm sitting here talking to you, looking at this rectangular device that's sitting in front of me, and none of us can live without these things. They've become very important. I would argue, by the way, that the internet, you don't get this kind of evolutionary change that we're looking for without the internet, which allows acceleration of all this information and allowing people to find other people and build new virtual communities and other such things. But the question is, how do you take advantage of this? Because you have to, because it's necessary, because it's the only way to get you into this new space without being dominated about it. The first step to that is realizing it, I believe. In my particular case, I fight against the domination of email and how it can just suck up huge amounts of time, and how that first thing you want to do in the morning is go grab your phone and find out what happened over the night or who sent you something or whatever. And if you don't think that is the technology dominating you, then I don't understand. I don't know how you see life, because that's exactly what it's doing. And as you know from the people who started Facebook and other kind of things, they have engineered it specifically to do that. So there is a kind of an arm's length kind of process. I, for instance, do not watch television, because television is, I forgot to tell you that in terms of chemtrails and fluoride, television is also one of the controlling mechanisms that's been used clearly for a long time to dominate and condition the space. And so what you really need to do is keep in your mind's eye what's going on here, and so that you can evaluate on a point to point, event by event, day to day kind of basis, what's happening and why, and whether you want to do that or not, rather than just naturally capitulate and just buy a new iPhone or whatever the thing is that everybody's trying to get you to do. That you need to think about it. You need to understand what they're doing. You need to think about, do you need one of those? Do you need them to follow you around and monitor everything that you do? How do you start to kind of extract yourself from all of that so that you can use the technology? How can you get Linux, do Linux? How do you do some other kind of things that kind of break you away from Microsoft and the connections that they and all of the major social media groups and everything have with the intelligence community? And so I would suggest that you can't get there from here without being aware and currently aware. That is to say, on a day-to-day, on a moment-to-moment basis, being able to be thinking about what's going on. Because if you don't think about it, then they've got you, because that's what they want you to do. So that's what I would suggest at the beginning. And then, there's some other things, but we can go on and we can come talk about that some other time.
Great. Linda, your hand is up.
Yes, very informative presentation. But I would like to say, among all the different issues that you brought up, the most deleterious is the genome manipulation, because for everything else, there is a way to go back, shut down the TV, the internet, and many other issues. But once the genome, like genome web, if you go, is scary to death, has been transformed, there is no way to return back to the normal, whatever the normal is. I don't know if you have a specific idea how to deal with the genome manipulation and biotechnology. And a question is where we can find online your presentation with all your nice slides.
Well, that's a good point. And one that I would have mentioned if I'd had a little bit, thought I had more time, because there's other things in like genetic modification that are an integral part of what's going on here. I think that you need to, for instance, grow your own food, eat organically and other kind of things, because that at least to some degree gives some confidence that what you're putting into your body does not have Roundup in it and all of the other kind of things that are often found in conventional kind of food sources. I think you don't want to eat junk food, because all of that stuff every study, everything that I've ever read about it says that all of it is kind of manipulated at one level or another, not only because it doesn't have much nutrition, but where you get the genetic modification and where you get GMO corn and the other kind of things that get put into your diet. Again, I would suggest that if you stand here and look at all of this all the time, kind of at arm's length, saying, what's going on? What are they doing to me and everything? I mean, you would never get one of these shots for COVID, because you don't know what they're doing to you. I mean, in some cases, we do know what they're doing to you, and it's just along the line of what you're talking about. There's an overarching kind of notion or question here, issue that you are perhaps alluding to, and that is that this is a time of decision. This is a time of selection. This is a time of kind of fundamental kind of change, where a large, if not majority, of the people on this planet are going to decide that they are going to become, more of what the powers that be are promoting. They are going to do more television, more stuff, more shots, more whatever, and there's nothing you can do about that. I'm convinced that you can't evangelize most of the folks, because they're captured in any of a number of kind of ways. On the other hand, though, what this is an opportunity for a new group to emerge. It's necessarily going to be a smaller group. There are all kinds of very interesting kind of scenarios about how this whole transition happens. And it goes all the way from evolutionary ones, that these waves of energy coming from the center of the galaxy do sequential kind of modification of who we are, and those of us who are sensitive and open to these things kind of rise to the occasion and become this new human. And on the other end of the spectrum is the possibility that the aliens come and just before some major catastrophic event on the planet, they pick up a whole lot of the new people who are thinking things in a different way, in a new way, and they take us off to a different planet that's been prepared. It's just like the Earth. Now, that may sound weird and strange to you, but read Revelations and parts of the Bible that way, where it says, I'm going to prepare a new place for you, and so on. And if you thought that was literal, then that might be the way it is. I mean, I know 3 people who say they have been taken to this new planet, and they've seen it, and it's a wonderful place, and there are no wars and other things, and they've been offered an opportunity to stay, and they've said, no, I need to go back. And in one case, the entity said to the woman, okay, the next time I come back, you're going to have 30 seconds to decide whether you're coming with me or not. And if you don't, I'm not going. I got other people I got to pick up. And it's hard to know for sure. That's an understatement, whether these kinds of things are real or not. But you should know by now, having seen how hard it is to determine what the truth is, just in conventional terms, that in these other kind of metaphysical and other kind of space, that you really have the potential of things happening that are unbelievable, inexplicable in kind of conventional kind of terms. And so, who knows? an amazing and wild and crazy time that is just laced with opportunity to become somebody new and a whole new human in a new world, and that's what's exciting to me about it all.
Great answer. Thank you. Lots to think about. Okay, Kevin, and then Charles.
Hey, John. I had a question about sort of the strategy space of the so-called planners. You might call them engineers instead of planners. So my question is sort of based around this idea of how wise they are. And it seems to me that a lot of times these people who want control are pretty short-sighted. For example, the big push for more socialism during Black Lives Matter and the pandemic controls kind of backfired. I guess it's a good question of how much resistance or how many people want to hang on to the old ways, how strong they are. And my question is really about, do you think that they have incorporated the reaction into their plans, or is this something that they didn't see?
Well, I've spent a lot of time thinking about that, and what I've come to the conclusion with is literally true or not, although I bet pretty good money on the fact that it is that there are essentially, as I suggested early on, two big factions on this planet, at least. And each of those factions has somewhere behind them an extraordinary big supercomputer. I visualize that there are essentially control rooms, like a moonshot or something, where you got all these people sitting in front of computers and different kinds of images projected on the walls in one way or another about what the state of the world is. And these computers are, in one case at least, on the kind of the controller side of the thing, are based upon game theory. Game theory is a discipline that essentially uses very sophisticated computers to anticipate how all the different parts within the game might behave, and how, if you did this to these kind of people, what are they, and then how will that change other places. It's just a systems analysis and systems kind of process. I know the CIA for a long time has used very sophisticated computers using game theory to anticipate different things happening on other sides of the world. Now, if you don't have anybody on the other side that's got one of those, then game theory probably works pretty well, because you don't have a counter strategy that's being generated. But in this particular case, I'd guess that the white hats, if you will, also have one, and they are responding to the initiatives, to the false flags, or whatever it turns out to be, that the COVID shots, and they too are trying to capture the narrative and change the thing and offer alternatives and present different kind of alternative kind of tracks and possibilities, and that I would guess, in this kind of scenario that I've just built, would give an explanation of why some of the things that they've tried to foist on us and force us to do, the COVID and the COVID shots particularly, have not worked out as well as they thought, because what you've had is this alternative media and other kind of things that have been, as much as they've tried to shut it down, they have not been successful at that. And, who knows why they have been able to sustain, the alternative media have been able to sustain themselves. I mean, in any number of countries around the world, the government could have made a single decision and shut down all of the alternative media, and you would have had a single point of view come out of the thing. That's not been the case. And so there are multiple sources that suggest that there are people, there are groups, organized groups, both sides of this thing. And so, and by the way, important, if you have any kind of a big sense of purpose in what this is all about, and what life is about, and what life on this planet is about, then you got to believe that this is we haven't come this far, and we haven't been influenced this far by alien input and whatever else, quote gods, to just have this thing all blow up. And so there's a bright light at the end of this tunnel, as far as I'm concerned. And you just have to kind of work your way through the trash and the tough times that are going to come for the next couple of years, because this is going to get really wild. Martin Armstrong, who's got a computer program that's never been wrong about for 40 years in terms of being able to anticipate, he's the most accurate prognosticator, and mostly in finance and in stock markets and stuff like that, says for 40 years his computer's been saying that there's going to be a global civil war between 2025 and 2027, that the United States is going to break up by 2030. There will be no United States, and there will be no European Union, and there will be 4, 5, or 6 different countries in North America. And you say to yourself, wow, if that in fact even begins to be true, then you can see that possibility written all over the place in terms of things that are happening on a day-to-day basis. And so, this has got a really bigger, it's many layers. It's very complex and lots of moving parts in the whole thing. And so folks who have, the intelligence community in particular, who have always thought that they knew how to manipulate and control all this stuff, have been increasingly unsuccessful these days, and hopefully they will continue to be.
You're muted there, Jim, but I guess we're sort of out of time.
Last
Charles,
question, Charles. Sorry.
Charles Ford, I'll defer to you if you can unmute yourself and ask a question or make a comment. Charles Ford, going once, going twice.
Okay, I'm here, man. I just had a hard time finding the button. I apologize. The one thing everybody in this line may be interested in, there's a website called suspiciousobserver.com, and it pretty much supports the theory and the science of a lot of the things that the speaker this morning has outlined, and I would recommend and encourage everybody to take a look. It's really been amazingly accurate about what's going on with the sun, the solar sheet of energy. The Earth is a great big lithium battery. It's building up, it's overcharging, and that's why we're seeing some of the things that we're seeing, what the impact on climate change is going to be, what's going on with the magnetic north and south pole. There's really good science, fact, observation there. And I would recommend everybody in this line to take a few minutes and get acquainted with it. He does a daily show that lasts about 2 minutes on YouTube. You can plug into that too if you want to. He's a retired, or he's a young man that will start off as a plaintiff attorney of all things. And now he's just made this his quest, and he's done really well with it. And the science world is paying serious attention to what he's been putting out there for almost 10 years now. So I just throw that out there as value for the group.
Thanks. Let me just quickly.
I would agree. That's a really good source. I've met him and had breakfast with him one time.
Nice. And we just saw in the news yesterday, I think, where Texas is voting to possibly secede from the United States. So we see a lot of these changes going on. Charlie, do you want to throw in something?
Well, I think we're out of time. So, John, do you want to give a final comment and say how folks can reach you?
Yeah, well, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. This is an amazing time, and we're all here to play a role, one presumes, in one way or another, and we need to remember that and engage, because this is the end of the World Series, the end of the night. This is it, the last game. And but people can reach me through the Arlington Institute at arlingtoninstitute.org. You can see all of the different programs we have, including transition talks, and I've got a free newsletter called Future Edition that we've published for 25 years, all about things like this. We'd love to have, anybody would put anybody on that list, and then you can see a bunch of other projects that we have. We've got one called Transition Net, where we're trying to put together a global community to build a vision, literally a vision of what a new world would look like. All of that at arlingtoninstitute.org.
So what about your wealth? If your money could actually talk to you, would you listen to it? Well, with the DNA Network Academy, your money actually can talk to you. And it's going to tell you just what it told this client. This family had over 24 debts, mortgages, car loans, the works. They were on track to take 20 years to pay it all off and instead did it in 8.5. Plus, they did it without refinancing, making more money, or even changing their lifestyle. So find out for yourself with a free analysis that is completely confidential. No personal information, no social security numbers, no credit checks, none of that nonsense. But what is exciting is that the outcome of that report you receive is a guaranteed outcome for you. To get that report, head on over to bit.ly/debt to wealth. You will arrive at this simple form. Fill it in as simple as lender number 1 and credit card number 2. What really matters is the accuracy of your numbers. You'll be able to see that if instead of 20 years or whatever your number is, that you may actually be out of debt and on your way to wealth in as little as 6.3 years like this client.